trained originally as a chiropractor, and I graduated many moons ago, and I started working in Cincinnati, and I thought I had my dream job working with elite athletes, Olympic athletes who had several gold medalists and silver medalists at the Olympics. And so I thought I was on cloud nine until I was on the news in a positive way for the good work we were doing. And as a result of that news report, we had about 80 people call in, and I still remember the phone just kept ringing after the news report ran. And we went from seeing the healthiest people, so people would come to us complaining that they couldn't run a 3-hour marathon, right? They were trying to break 3 hours. These were the type of complaints I was dealing with. And it was fun working with these people because just like you guys, they play all out. High performers, they quantify themselves, they want to be the best version of themselves. And so overnight, literally, our practice changed because after that news report on tennis elbow and golfer's elbow, we had scores of people calling us, and as they started coming in, none of them had elbow pain or tennis elbow or golfer's elbow. In fact, many of them were debilitated and crippled and just in excruciating amounts of chronic pain. And so overnight our practice switched, and I started interviewing these people. They had no business being in my office because I was trained in structural care and very well trained in structural care, musculoskeletal care, and I just couldn't help them. But what I also realized at that time is nobody else was helping them because they had been to every doctor, every specialist, they've tried all the drugs. My wife's a pharmacist, and I'd come home and consult with her and be like, what else can we do for these people? And she's like, according to the protocols, they're doing everything that's possible. So, if anyone's a doctor and you realize that your patients are like your family, at least that's how I view them. And so when you can't help somebody, like when your child is sick and they're, riled over in pain and you can't help them, it's like a hopeless feeling, right? And so that's how I felt. So patient after patient would come in. I just felt gutted because I didn't know where to send them. Like, it's one thing if you can't help somebody, but it's another thing if you don't know where to send them or what to do for them. So around that time, I started doing my own research online, and I said, there's something here, and I'm very entrepreneurial, and I said, there's people who have a problem, and there's nobody solving this problem, so there's clearly an opportunity to help. And so I started researching, and around the same time, serendipitously, as when the student is ready, the master appears. And so I started getting emails from who would later become my mentor, Dr. Grisanti, and he was solving these types of problems. People with IBS and Crohn's and colitis and fibromyalgia. We call these wastebasket terms because it's just like the doctors just, crumpling up their case and throwing it in the garbage because there's nothing they can do for them. And so he was helping these people, and what he was using was something called functional medicine. And anyone here familiar with that term? Okay, great. So functional medicine is basically personalized medicine. So each and every one of you has a unique combination of emotions, of family situations, of genetics, of microbiomes, which we'll get into a little bit later. And so it's impossible using the current algorithm that we have in medicine to actually apply the same intervention to people who have the same diagnosis. A diagnosis is a convenience for the insurance companies. It's a convenience for the doctor. And once you get a diagnosis, then there's a predictable algorithm that the patient has to go through. Whether that moves them in the right direction or not, that's what the doctors are, prescribing. And so we quickly realized that this is why the system is failing, is because they treat everyone the same. So if all of us in this room had the same diagnosis, we would all get the same medications, whether that was the right thing or not, because that's what the algorithm dictated. And so when you narrow people down into a box, you really can't help them because you shut down all the other opportunities that there are to help them. So through functional medicine, I realized that there's so much more that we could do for people. And if we look at people as individuals instead of as a diagnosis, then we can make a bigger impact for them. And so my boss at the time, when I told her about this, she thought I was nuts. And we're talking about 10 years ago. Because she just wanted to keep treating athletes. And bless her heart, she was great at what she did, but I just saw an opportunity. And I also saw an opportunity to help healthy people as well. So all of you in here have unlocked potential, including myself, right? How many of you feel like you have unlocked potential? Yeah. So when we dig a little bit deeper and we focus on, instead of a diagnosis, but we focus on opportunity, then we can create opportunity for you. But if we focus on a diagnosis, then the algorithms basically treat the diagnosis and make people look better on a piece of paper, but don't actually fix the problem. In fact, millions of people go to their doctor every year and get normal blood work, but they feel terrible, right? And so what we started to do then is started investigating the causative factor. So I'm very big on words, as some of you are. So when you think of the word lab result, it's a result. right? But what is it a result of? It's a result of lifestyle. It's a result of environment. It's a result of our diet. It's a result of how much sleep we get. It's a result of our connection with nature. So there's all these confounding factors that make a big difference in how that number shows up on a piece of paper. And so in medicine, they treat the number. They don't treat the patient. So I'll give you an example. Anyone here have their vitamin D tested? Okay. So you all should. Okay, it's a very important marker. But vitamin D is known as the sunshine hormone, right? It's a hormone, it's not a vitamin. So the other thing with medicine is they oftentimes use misleading words. Your body makes vitamin D, okay, when we're exposed to sunlight. And so when vitamin D is low, the medical approach would be to give you vitamin D and make that number on a piece of paper look better. And you'd go back to the doctor, and the doctor would say, hey, your vitamin D looks better. But the patient may not feel better, because remember, it's a result. So what did that low vitamin D result from? A lack of exposure to sunlight. So if somebody's not getting adequate sunlight, what else are they not getting? They're not getting adequate fresh air. They're not being outside in nature. They're probably sitting at their desk all day. They're probably exposed to artificial light all day, which means their whole circadian rhythm, which is our sleep biology, gets thrown off. So if I just fix that number on a piece of paper, but I don't fix the lifestyle that created it, am I ever going to get that person healthy? It's impossible. It's biologically impossible. So this is the paradigm shift that we're trying to bring to the forefront, where people can start understanding that you're more than a number. Okay? And so what we try to do is incorporate, getting the right testing done and going deeper with the testing, and then looking at you at a cellular level, at a genetic level, and then coming up with a protocol to address and optimize your physiology, but then also looking at lifestyle. And the reason lifestyle is important, especially in a room like this, is because our children are watching us, right? So the lifestyle that we are putting out there, the lifestyle that we're living, is a lifestyle that is going to be fractally imprinted into them. So we can't just have, what I always say is that our kids and really patients are looking for role models, not pill bottles. Okay? So we have to be role models for our families, for our communities, for the people that look up to us, even as physicians. That's why our institute's called Living Proof, because we try to embody what we teach our patients. And so when you have a name like that, you kind of have to, it holds you accountable, right? And that accountability is very huge for us. So, now I actually train doctors, so I retired clinically. And the significance of that, the reason I say that is because now I can say whatever I need to say. So when you get rid of your license, when you're not a licensed practitioner anymore, then you can take the muzzle off. Because most doctors, they're afraid of losing their license if they say something that goes against the mainstream, agenda. So I said, fuck it, I'm just gonna get rid of my license, so you can't take that away from me. So I have nothing to lose, kind of like Eminem, right? So I have nothing to lose. I have nothing to lose, so what are you gonna take from me, right? So as a civilian, you actually have more freedom of speech. So what that's done for me personally, it's allowed me to say things that every other doctor wants to say, but can't say. And because of my entrepreneurship and skills, I've created financial freedom for myself, so I'm not reliant on seeing patients to put food on my table, right? Because most doctors are. That's the only way they know how to make money. And in fact, if I'll say this because I think it's relevant, because you all probably have doctors, is the way medical doctors are chosen is based on the way our whole school system is designed. We reward repeaters. Okay, so repeaters are rewarded. So if you can repeat something, even if you don't know why the hell you're repeating it, or even if it doesn't make sense and you don't question it, then we're going to reward you and we're going to take you to the top of the pile. And that's why our medical system is based on choosing the people who have the highest grades and people who don't question anything. And that's why there's very little innovation in medicine, right? So we want people who are going to follow algorithms without questioning it and do things, even if that thing is going to kill that person that they're seeing in front of them, they're going to do it without questioning it, because that's how they're chosen. And then we're going to put them in immense amounts of debt and then create a single source of income for them, either through insurance companies or through socialized medicine. So now they have no way of getting out of this shithole that they're in. And so that's why most doctors burn out. And so about 55 to 60% of doctors are completely burnt out. But they have no other way of practicing because the system has them under their thumb. And so this is the type of healthcare that we're all getting, right? And the other thing with healthcare is we've essentially, we go to our doctor and we delegate our health to them. kind of like our taxes, right? Like, hey, here's my invoices, like do my taxes for me. And that works for your accountant, but it doesn't work for, for your health. And so our philosophy in our practice, and really what I hope to share with you guys, is that the doctor of the future isn't me. The doctor of the future is the patient. So in the past, it used to be that the only way to access information that we all have access to that we probably take for granted is you'd have to go to school. So the only way to know what a doctor knew is you'd have to spend 8 years in school, postgraduate. Well, that's changed now. Right? If a patient has a diagnosis, like they're smarter than the doctor with respect to that diagnosis because they're spending 8 hours a day on their computer researching it, and they have access to all the information in the entire universe. So now the patient actually is more knowledgeable about that condition than the practitioner is. And so in the current system, we have this, really paternal system where doctors don't like being questioned. Doctors don't like when the patient comes to them and suggests a lab test, right? Because medicine, unfortunately, a lot of it's egos. So I posted this a few months ago. I said, if we could just give every doctor 5 grams of psilocybin mushrooms, it would solve our healthcare crisis, because their egos would dissolve and they would start to realize how to partner with their patients instead of keeping up this barrier. Like when patients come to us, we're like, great, you brought all this research. Well, you just saved me a shit ton of time. Let's go through this and see what of this applies to you, right? Like what's relevant to you, because we live in we used to live in an information era, now we live in an experiential era. So people are looking for experiences, but they're also looking for people who have experience. They're not looking for people who just know information, because information's free. In fact, it's free and accessible to the point where it's actually worthless because there's a lot of misinformation out there. So what we do now is we partner with people and we take them on a journey. We clean up their lifestyle. We do specific things that we know are going to get their body in a state of healing and repair, because there is a switch that you can turn on, we'll talk about that today, that immediately puts your body in a state of healing, repair, and regeneration. And nobody talks about this. And we'll talk about why that system has been hijacked by our current society and why you see people getting sick. We'll talk about, if we get into this, we'll talk about why I don't support, and I'll explain why. So if this affects you in any way, don't take it the wrong way. But I don't support anything that raises awareness about any diseases, because the way our mind works, what do we say? What we focus on expands. So if I want to create more cancer, what do? I just create more awareness on cancer. And now I have your brains working on creating more cancer in people. That's how powerful your mind is. Right? So until we realize that, and then we start realizing the manipulation through the media. I mean, pharmaceutical companies aren't dumb, right? They know what they're doing, right? The most powerful tool that they try to get into is this. That's why they spend billions of dollars on marketing. It's not to get into your wallets, it's to get into your mind. Because if I get into your mind, then I can create whatever reality I want to create for you. So this is my worldview. This is the way I look at the world. I see a lot of nodding heads. Like, does this make sense to you guys? Right, it's all in plain sight, but sometimes we don't connect the dots and we don't realize what's actually happening. So that's a nutshell kind of where I'm at. So
that's awesome. That's great. I'm really having to work with these questions, aren't I? Hey, so I had, first of all, I want to thank Mike McCarthy for suggesting that I talk with Sachin, so thanks to Mike. And then also I wanted to thank Chip Franks, who is on Hal's team, who gave Sachin just a rave review. And then I was chatting with Sachin, and I had learned, I think from you, that you had worked with Joe Polish and really helped him. And then it hit me that I was at a breakfast with Joe Polish a year ago, and you were the one he was talking about at breakfast that like revolutionized his life. And it came full circle, and here we are chatting. And so I thought I'd do something fun. You don't know this, but I reached out to Joe. Oh. And so Joe, can I borrow your mic for a second? So this is what Joe said about Sachin. Check this out. Wow. And I know you can't see it, but you can hear it, and that's the most important part here.
Hello, Front Row Dads. This is Joe Polish. I'm the founder of Genius Network, and I want to say something about Dr. Sachin Patel. Now, I hang around a lot of geniuses, a ton of people in the health field. There's a lot of people that have advice, but Sachin not only walks the walk, he talks the talk. He is super smart. He knows what he's doing. He's been incredibly helpful to me and to a lot of people that I know. And so just get ready to pay attention, because a few things from him, fundamentals about your health and things that you can do, can absolutely change not only your life, the way you feel, your energy level, your sleep, your focus, muscle, losing weight, whatever it is. You know, he who has their health has 1,000 dreams. He or she that does not have their health has only one. So when it comes to health, he's the guy. Listen to him, and I hope you have an amazing time.
Wow.
There you go, man.
Thank you. I appreciate that.
So one of the things I wanted to get into, Sachin, with you is this idea of, especially what many entrepreneurs will face when it comes to their health. I think there's a little bit of burning the candle at both ends, pushing through, not getting enough sleep. We could talk about that. We could talk about something I took an interest in, and you guys, is adrenal fatigue, and I want to get to that a little bit too. You guys may or may not know this, and I'll just share this. This is a little bit behind why I'm so excited about this conversation, is that when I was in Russia last year with Tatiana, you could do blood tests over there a lot cheaper than you can do them here. So she just said, let's run some routine blood work, right? Just a general panel of let's test for as much as we can. And so one thing came back and it said I have a fast erythrocyte sedimentation rate, which was a little bit alarming, and that I had really low iron and really low hemoglobin. And then that was alarming enough to the folks in Russia. They said, hey, you should check that out when you get back to the States. So I went and I reran the blood work, and I talked to a doc here, and ultimately the doc's like, hey, if for you at 43 years old with these numbers, that generally means you have some type of an internal bleed, that is going on. That's what I would suspect. And I don't know what that means. It might mean it's an ulcer. It could be something more serious. It might just be something else, and we don't know what it is, but it's worth checking into for sure. And I started paying a little more attention. I'd wondered why my cardio was dropping quite a bit, and that would explain it. There was some reasoning behind what was happening. And so I think that for me, there was a level of awareness that was brought to my world that I previously didn't have. And even though I care a great deal about my health, and watching what Hal went through for a year battling acute lymphoblastic leukemia, and watching him fight through that, there's certainly an awareness, but I wasn't taking care of myself. I wasn't monitoring the things. I had it here, but I wasn't getting the results needed in order to make changes. And so because of that, I started to make some really cool lifestyle changes. I've started to see some progress in different areas. My endurance is coming back because we're doing certain things. And that's what I'm hoping to get into, a little bit of the things that I think might affect you guys too. Like adrenal fatigue is this thing, and I want you to take over here in a second, but it's that I think affects a lot of people that are really pushing hard, hard charging guys that are going after life. And so that's why I think it's so important, because if we don't take care of our health, like Joe said, you have your health, you got 1,000 dreams for you and your family. But if you don't, you've got one, and that's to reclaim your health. So Sachin, with that, I just want to open up the question, and this will be my last question, and then on to you guys. It's what do you see from these hard charging guys? What are they battling? What should we be thinking about? What types of questions might we want to be considering asking as it relates to themes that you've seen in your practice?
Great question. So you actually said something yesterday that was quite profound, and maybe it landed for some of you, but you said if you had 9 hours a day and you meditated for one of those hours, that the other 8 would be far more effective. And you'd probably get twice as much work done, because you'd actually be using the part of your brain that separates us from all animals on the planet, which is the neocortex. So let me talk about the nervous system really quick, because the nervous system is what regulates everything. So we have a system in our body called the autonomic nervous system. So right now, you guys are using your conscious minds to focus on this conversation, and you're writing things down, but there's an unconscious part of your body that's working right now, that's regulating your immune system, your blood pressure, your digestion, all the things that keep us alive. So think about when you go to bed and you're not really thinking consciously anymore, all these trillions of processes that are going on are happening unconsciously. and they're happening while you're awake as well. So right now your body is coordinating the function of 100 trillion cells, which are performing 100 trillion or 1 septillion functions. So that's a 1 with 24 zeros. That's happening simultaneously. During this conversation, during this weekend, billions of cells will die and replace themselves. So you have this vital force, we call it, this innate intelligence that, that built you and will continue to rebuild you, day in and day out. In fact, your digestive lining replaces itself every 3 days. Your skin every 30 to 90 days, your liver every 6 months. So there isn't a single cell in your body that's more than 7 years old. Okay, so you're in a constant state of dying and being reborn. You're essentially a hologram when you think about it. So it's quite magical when you realize what's happening right now at this very moment. Your heart today will beat 100,000 times. You'll take 23,000 breaths, whether you like it or not. Whether you have gratitude for it or not, it's going to happen for you. So it's pretty amazing when you just put it into that context. And so your nervous system is regulating and coordinating all of this function, but it has two modes that it operates out of. The first one is fight or flight, which is sympathetic dominance. And the second one is parasympathetic, or what we call the rest and digest state. So I'll talk about sympathetic dominance first, because that's how most entrepreneurs, especially in the first few years of running your business, that's where we're stuck in. We're stuck in that sympathetic dominance because we've got to get things done. And so when we're, let me backtrack a little bit. This actually has to do with marketing, but it also has to, so it'll help you in your business, but it also has to do with how our body works. So all of the inputs that are coming into you right now go through a part of our brain called the limbic brain. The limbic brain is essentially a decision maker. Okay, so it decides for us based on our past experiences, based on our belief system, based on our values, whether the situation that we're in is a stressful situation or not. So imagine if a lion walked into this room. Okay, most of us, unless you're a lion tamer, are probably going to be, immediately have a response. But you're going to have that response in the limbic brain first before you have it in the neocortex. In fact, it takes about 2 seconds for that. There's a gap of about 2 seconds before we even realize what's happening. And the reason for that is because if we had to think through every stressful situation, we'd be dead, right? So 2 seconds is a long time if a lion's in this room. So what happens is the limbic brain, through the amygdala, decides that this is a stressful situation based on your values and beliefs and past experiences, and immediately a signal gets sent down your spinal cord, okay, before you can even think about it. So your body is already prepared for survival. Now what happens is when that signal goes down the spinal cord, it sends a message to every single organ in your body and tells it to shut down. Okay, because is digestion going to save you right now? Is your detoxification going to save you? Is reproductive health going to save you? So all of these vital organs basically shut down. And write this down: where you send flow is where you send function. Which means that if I want to increase the function of a part of my body, I have to increase blood flow to it. So if I wanted to do those lunges today, I need to send more blood to my legs, right? But that blood has to come from somewhere. Where does it come from? It comes from the trunk. So at rest, the majority of our blood is going to our trunk organs. When we're active, when we're running, when we're exercising, the blood is going to our extremities. Okay? So stress is, exercise is a controlled form of stress, right? I would call it a eustress because we have positive emotion attached to it. But if a lion's chasing us, right, that's a life or death type of situation. And we want immediate action. We want immediately all these organs to shut off because they're not going to save us. And we want our catecholamine levels and cortisol levels to go up. So catecholamines basically create that fight or flight response. Cortisol creates that fight or flight response. But most people don't realize this, and this is important to note, that the main function of cortisol in our body is actually not to have a stress response, but it's to raise blood sugar. So anytime I increase somebody's cortisol levels, I automatically raise their blood sugar. So this is why diabetics who have stressful lives, they change their diet, their blood sugar doesn't go down because it's the stress that's causing their cortisol to raise their blood sugar. Okay? Same blood goes everywhere. So this is why you can't develop any disease in isolation. So when people say, oh, you've got this disease, I'm like, no, you actually have a disease of your entire body, but it's going to show up in the weakest organ first. Right? So imagine your organs as represented as different buckets, right? So there's 20 buckets on the ground here and it's raining and all these buckets are different sizes. Well, the smallest bucket's going to fill up first, right? And eventually the other buckets are going to fill up, right, if I don't stop it from raining. So, so we have to realize that, and each of us have different size buckets. So some of us have better detox than others, some of us have better adrenal reserve than others. So each of us is going to be affected by similar situations differently. So anyways, going back to the stress response, we want that survival response. So a lot of people come to us and they have, you know, issues with their detox, they have issues with their digestive function, they have issues with, you know, their reproductive health. And so the only way to heal them isn't to give them more pills. The only way to heal them is to actually send blood to those organs. Does that make sense? But if they're stressed out, am I sending blood to those organs? No. So will they ever get better? So what do? They bounce around from one doctor to the next doctor, this supplement, that supplement, but they're not fixing the foundational premise, which is, am I even sending blood and function to that organ or not? Does that make sense? Okay, so when we stay sympathetic dominant, which many entrepreneurs do, and I did that for many years, even knowing this, it's hard. It's just because you know it doesn't mean you're immune to it, right? So, you know, for many years building my business, I had to go through a lot of, a lot of challenges. I had to move from one country to another, start a whole new practice, had a son in the middle there, had a company that owed me $60,000. I had to walk away from that. My parents lost their business. This was all happening at the same time. So, and then they moved in with me, so I was feeding 5 mouths and, you know, a lot of challenges. So we all go through this, but, so when we're sympathetic dominant, we're not healing. It's impossible for us to heal. So the question I ask my clients is, how many of you feel better when you go on vacation? Anyone feel better when they go on vacation? Raise your hands. All of us, right? Did I change your genetics? No. Did I change your diet? Probably eat worse when you're on vacation, right? What did I change? I changed what you think about. I changed the inputs that are coming into the limbic brain. I changed your environment. You're spending more time in the sun. Like, you're doing all of the things that make you more human, right? You're a human being at this point instead of a human doing, which is how most people live their lives. And so that quickly gets people to realize that, hey, it's not my body, right? Your body is the only thing that's going to save you from this. It's not going to be the drug, it's not the supplement, it's your body. It's that intelligence that's woven into every single cell that we have. I mean, you are the cosmic jewel of the entire cosmos, right? If a single cell from your body was found in outer space, it would be the greatest discovery of mankind, right? But we take it for granted because we have 70 trillion of them, right, that are coordinating this function all the time. So we have to get people to switch from being sympathetic dominant to being parasympathetic dominant. And when we switch to going into parasympathetic dominance, then every single goal that we have, whether it's to be healthy, whether it's to be smart, whether it's to have kids, whether it's to have better immunity, all of those goals live on that side of the fence. So our body in its infinite wisdom actually created a single nerve that does all that for us. So you stimulate this one nerve. Does anyone know what it is? Yeah, you stimulate this one nerve and it takes your body from being sympathetic dominant, gets it into a parasympathetic state. Now I send blood to all the organs, all my vital organs, my liver, my kidneys, so on and so forth. In fact, at rest, 50% of your blood goes to your liver and kidneys. 50%. Do you think those are important organs? Mm-hmm. When you're in a stress state, that goes down to 5%. And we live in toxic times. So you combine, toxicity, you combine, the outdoor air, the indoor air, like all the things in our environment, like glyphosate and, chemicals that are added to our food, petrochemicals that we inhale, and you put somebody in a stress state, you're not even giving them the capacity to metabolize these toxins out of their body. So when you go parasympathetic, your liver works better, your kidneys work better, digestion works better, immune system works better, blood sugar starts to regulate, you start sending blood to the neocortex, which is the part of our brain that makes us smart, that allows us to problem solve. And this is why meditation can be so powerful, because we want to send blood here if we're trying to solve a problem, right? When we send blood to our reptilian brain, we're reacting as opposed to resolving or solving an issue, okay? So, you have a question?
You mentioned something about a nerve, somebody answered it.
Yeah, I'm going to get to that. I'll get to that in a second. So if this is the goal that all of our patients have, if this is the goal that all of you guys have, right, to be as healthy as possible, to be as intelligent as possible, to be good role models for your family, then we need to know how to stimulate that nerve. And it's super easy. The ancients have known about this. They probably didn't know why it worked, but that doesn't matter, right? When I put my foot on the gas, the car goes. I don't have to know why it does that. I just have to know that it does, right? And Steve Jobs says that the greatest sign of sophistication is simplicity. So if we had to match the complexity of the body in order to solve the challenges that the body has to overcome, we will never get there, right? We're still, like, if you look at research is doubling every, 4 months now, right? Which, it's ironic, it's kind of paradoxical, because the more research we do, the more questions we have, which means we actually know less, right? So as we do more research, we're doing the research because we don't know. So we're actually getting dumber and smarter at the same time, right? It's kind of an interesting paradox. So the body is simple, right? Just like a computer. If I had to match and understand every single inner nuance of a computer to even type up a letter on the keyboard, that's not very sophisticated, right? It's simple, right? And that's where the sophistication comes from. So our bodies are the most sophisticated thing that I'm aware of, which means that they've already handled the complex calculations. They're already doing that for us constantly. I mean, if you think about it, we'd all be dead if we had to know every single detail, right? Like, we wouldn't make it past just a few hours of being alive. So we have just amazing amounts of resilience, and we should not take that for granted. But if we're operating at the margins of our resilience instead of at the center of that resilience, I mean, we can live a completely, radically different life. So the way we stimulate the vagus nerve is actually really simple. And you're going to write this down, but you probably already know it. So the vagus nerve is cranial nerve number 10. It's stimulated by a few things. You have one on either side. Vagus in Latin means wanderer. So it starts here and it wraps around every organ in the trunk. Okay? So the way we stimulate it, there's a few ways. One is deep breathing. Okay, so the diaphragm is heavily innervated by the vagus nerve. So deep breathing, when we do meditation, for example, when we do yoga, when we do holotropic breathing, it's all about getting this vagus nerve stimulated. Okay, so very simple. Another way to stimulate the vagus nerve is talking. Okay, so by me speaking right now and you guys having conversations throughout this weekend, you're mechanically vibrating that nerve. That's why we always feel better after we talk things through, right? So we don't necessarily know why. Some of it might be emotional, but some of it's also because we're getting into that parasympathetic state, okay? Another way, a more advanced way, is to actually gargle. So you take, let's say 30 mils of water, and the more water you add, the more challenging it becomes, and you gargle the alphabet twice a day. Now, the vagus nerve sits right next to another part of your brainstem that stimulates tear production. So you know you're doing it enough if you start tearing. Okay, so that's the sign that you're actually aggressively enough stimulating the vagus nerve. Another way is chanting Om, right, or singing or humming. So really simple stuff, right? So when people like Joe Polish come to me who've seen like all these different specialists, like, I give them the simplest things to do because I'm relying on the body to handle the complexities, right? The body already has the anatomical and intelligent information that's required to heal itself. I mean, that's all it knows how to do, right? If your body wanted to kill you, it just has to stop breathing for 4 minutes, and it hasn't done that yet, right? It only knows how to create health. And so, these fuckers, man, when they talk about things like a war on cancer, right? A war on diabetes. It's not a war. Your body doesn't fight back. It wants to be healthy, right? It's thanking you when you make better choices, right? So it wants you to do these things. So it's not a war. It's not going to be resistant, right? We just have to understand that this is all built into us, right? But that's what they don't want you to know, because if it's built into you, they can't sell you anything.
So I've heard, and I don't know whether it's true or not, that intermittent fasting and how that plays into the body healing itself.
Mm-hmm.
I've heard after 3 days of no food, your body naturally starts to produce stem cells. Is that complete BS, or is there truth to that?
Actually, a good question. So can I get to that?
Yeah.
Just make sure I get to that, because that's actually one of the things I want to talk about. So getting parasympathetic dominant, the most parasympathetic dominant thing that we can do is sleep. Because when we sleep, we're in a complete state of rest, right? Our body is calm, we're sending blood to the organs. But if you look at sleep statistics, we sleep about 2 to 3 hours less than we used to. So after the light bulb was invented, we sleep about 2 to 3 hours less. Okay, and so knowing that, that's important, right? Because those 2 to 3 hours aren't filled with meditation, right? They're not filled with drum circles, right? They're not filled with with like grounding exercises and like worshiping the moon. So they're filled with more stress. So not only are we sleeping less, but we're actually sympathetic dominant for 2 additional hours of the day. Now, light is very important. Some of you, who was it that wanted to talk about sleep? Or Brian, right? You've gone deep into the sleep thing. So with sleep, that's one of the first things we do. If we can't get a person sleeping well, then they're never going to get better, right? So we want them, and finding that right amount of sleep is going to be individualized. Like the amount of BDNF that you make, which we'll talk about genetics in a minute, the amount of BDNF you make determines how much sleep you need. So some people are going to require more sleep than others for that repair to take place. When you go to sleep at night, your brain gets an oil change. Okay, so literally the fluids in your brain flush out. And I'm keeping this really simple, but the fluids in your brain flush out and you get new fluids. You get an oil change every night. Okay, this is why when we don't sleep well, we can't think straight. Okay, our immune system is repairing while we're sleeping. Our digestive system is repairing while we're sleeping. Our liver is detoxing. Our kidneys are detoxing. So all of these processes that we're after, people take all kinds of supplements for these type of things, but it's happening for you naturally. Now you can take supplements to provide your body with the cofactors that are required for it to do its job, but if you're not doing the action that's required in addition to taking the supplements, you're not going to get the result. So sleep is the first thing, right? That's the first thing we want to fix with people. And then the next question that comes up, so I'll talk about sleep. So I use an Oura ring. Anyone here? I saw a few people with Oura rings, right? So Oura rings are great because it tracks something called HRV. It tracks your heart rate variability. And so that's a measure of resilience. And I made a mistake. I put mine in airplane mode and I didn't bring my docking station. So the nice thing about this ring is that you can put it in airplane mode. So if you're concerned about EMF exposure, or if you have a Fitbit perhaps which is constantly emitting a signal, you can turn this ring off. So it's collecting data for up to 2 weeks, and then I can pair it, and then that signal goes to my phone, and I can see how well I slept. I can see what my HRV was. I can see if there was a change in my body temperature, which is great for women if they're ovulating. I can see what my readiness score is, right? So today I did the exercise thing, but I was not ready because I got less sleep than I normally would, and I'm in a different time zone, and so on and so forth. So had I used my ring, I probably, as a metric, I probably wouldn't have pushed myself as hard, right? So you can decide how hard you're going to push yourself based on how you're recovering from the day or the days leading up to this, okay? And so it's good to have this kind of data because you can actually see if, hey, do I need to take a break, right? Some of you probably need to work out less, actually, right? So sometimes people come to us and they're working out too much because they're just too sympathetic dominant. And they're not recovering, because exercise isn't about the effort, it's about the recovery. Because that's when we actually grow. It's when we grow when we recover. So one of my mentors, Charles Poliquin, the first thing he would focus on with his Olympic athletes would be sleep. If they weren't sleeping well, they're not going to win gold medals. When I went to the Olympic Training Center in Lake Placid, that's the primary focus of Olympians, is how much sleep they get. So, it's very, very important. So people who want to operate at a world-class level focus on their sleep, because that's when we regenerate, that's when we recover, that's when we repair. And that's important for us to show up, how we're in our best way the next day, right? So if you want to show up as a better dad, get some sleep, right? You know how your kids are, right, when they don't sleep well, right? So what makes us any different? We're just better at controlling our emotions, but we're just bottling it up. We're just bottling up how we feel, right? They're expressing themselves because they haven't formed their frontal cortex hasn't formed yet, right? So children will say whatever's on their mind because they don't have this, they don't have this governor on their brain that tells them to not say it. So the shit that we say in our heads is the things that kids say out loud. Okay, and sometimes we can't say that we're tired. Sometimes we can't act cranky even though we want to, because we've got to put on this game face. So instead of faking it till you make it, just go to sleep, right? So simple strategies to help improve sleep are this. So when you're exposed to indoor light, you're getting about 500 lux of light. On a cloudy day, you're getting about 10,000. On a sunny day like today, you're getting about 30,000. Okay? Our body is actually, believe it or not, a lot of our energy actually comes from sunlight. Okay, so just like plants get a lot of their energy from sunlight, so do we. So there's, has anyone heard of the book called The Fourth Phase of Water? No? Okay, so when you go outside in the sun, which you should probably all do today, I know I'm going to, you actually create vasodilation. That vasodilation creates more blood flow to the surface of your skin. When that happens, there's a fourth phase of water, we call it, where you're actually creating energy by propulsing blood through your blood vessels. So there's an electrical gradient that actually takes place as a result of being exposed to sunlight. That's why you feel better when you're in the sun, right? This is why people who get more sunlight actually eat less food. Okay, so if you want to do intermittent fasting and you don't want to have all these cravings all the time, get outside, because you're going to be able to recharge yourself. Only about 4% of your energy actually comes from, and write down Harry Massey, you can listen to his work, but only about 4 to 5% of your energy actually comes from food. Massey, Massey. And he's in Genius Network too, so very little of your energy actually comes from food. Most of it comes from the ambient environment. So, of course, the food industry is going to want to tell you that most of it comes from food, right? How is it that, all the studies that have ever been done on mice and even in humans, people who eat less live longer? Right? So why is it that people are being told we need to eat 5, 6, 7 times a day? Every time you have a meal, you actually create an inflammatory and immune response. You have to. So it's imagine I'll use a border example. I don't know how sensitive that topic is here, but it's like 1 million people flooding the border every time you have a meal, because in your food as it goes through you is actually going through you, and then depending on how you digest and absorb it, it's going to get absorbed into your system. But every time something gets absorbed into your system, it has to go through a part of your digestive tract called the gut-associated lymphatic tissue, which means that every single molecule of food that crosses into your bloodstream has to go through border patrol. It literally does, right? We can't just let food come into our bodies. We'd be dead, right? Because these are foreign proteins, these are bacteria, these are viruses. So there has to be this mechanism, it's called our intestinal barrier, that lines our entire digestive tract where food is absorbed, and this is a very energy intensive process. So every time you eat, about 40% of your energy now is being directed towards your trunk so that you can digest and process and eliminate that food. It takes a lot of energy to make stomach acid. Your stomach acid is 1 million times more acidic than your blood. So if you know chemistry, you know how much energy that takes to transfer that much hydrogen. And so making stomach acid is very energy intensive. When it comes to digestion, you have to be in a parasympathetic state. Okay, so people come to us and they're eating organic, they're eating a clean diet, they're on the Whole30, whatever it is they're doing, but they're like, why does my digestion suck? It's because where you send flows, where you send function. So if you're stressed out when you're eating, or even if you have a negative, like some people, we live in the first time in history where people think they complain about eating a healthy meal. Right? Like, what the fuck? Like, you're complaining about eating a healthy meal. What's that going to do to your body? Right? They're victimizing themselves. Like, oh, I don't want to eat healthy. Why? Right? How does that make sense? Right? So people who have a negative relationship with food will never get healthy eating that food, because that's how powerful the mind is, right? If you view healthy food as punishment, right, how will you ever get healthy eating that? So we change the state in which people eat. So there's 5 things that you want to pay attention to when it comes to digestion. So the first one is choose. So choose foods that basically represent who you want to become, not who you are, because that food becomes you after you eat it. Right? You don't poop that meal out the next day. You might poop what's left of it, but whatever gets absorbed into your body gets woven into your cells. Some of that food might stick around for up to 7 years, because some of your cells are 7 years old. Okay? So it's not just a transient thing. It's not like, oh, I'm going to have this and I'm going to, clean my diet up next week. Right? That food sticks with you. So eat for who you want to become. Okay? So choose the right foods. The next one is chew. You have to chew your food like your life depends on it. And so, because it does. So most of you eat salads, right? You eat plant foods. And so if you go back to basic biology, the outside wall of a cell is made out of cellulose, which human beings do not make enzymes to digest through. So if you look at a piece of kale, for example, under a microscope, you're going to see millions of cells that have a cellulose shell around it. Does that make sense? This is why corn goes right through you, because you don't make the enzymes to digest through the kernel. So if we take that down to a microscopic level, you don't make the enzymes to digest through your lettuce or your kale or any of the vegetables or fruits that you're eating. So you have to chew them. So we have teeth for a reason. Your stomach doesn't have teeth, right? So it can't chew your food for you. So you've got to chew it. What chewing also does is it sends a message from your masseter muscle to your brain that says, hey, he's eating or she's eating. And so we need to prepare the stomach for the food that's coming. The reason you have taste buds is not for pleasure, but it's to tell your brain, to tell your pancreas, your liver, your gallbladder what ratio of fats, proteins, and carbohydrates are coming, so that you can make enzyme soup that digests that meal for you. This is why artificial flavors and artificial sweeteners can be a problem, because your brain thinks something is coming because you trick the tongue, but you can't trick the enzymes. Right? This is why people get upset stomachs or they don't digest their food properly, because it's not just about what you eat, it's about how you assimilate it as well. Does that make sense? Is this boring or is this interesting to you? Okay.
Can you start from the top?
So chew, right? Especially the healthier you eat, the more you want to chew. Okay? You're going to get way more nutrition out of that food, especially plant-based foods. The next one is to chill. So you got to be in a parasympathetic state. So maybe shut your computer off, right? Don't check your emails. If these things cause you stress, right? I love checking my email, to be totally transparent, because I get tons of testimonials, I get lots of thank yous, I get lots of positive information coming to me. So I check my email not quite first thing in the morning, but pretty close, because I just love starting my day off right. Yep.
Why did you say it's healthier you eat, more important it is to chew? Why is that? Because
usually if you're eating healthier, you're eating more plants, like fruits, vegetables, things like that, and those foods have an outer coating made out of cellulose. And so the only way to open up that cell is to break that cell wall open. So that's what your teeth do for you. Yep.
Things like stevia, do they trick your body? Is that a bad thing?
Yeah, so you just want to be conscious of that, because they do, right? And the nice thing about stevia is it doesn't create so much of not as much as aspartame and some of these other sweeteners. It doesn't create as much of a spike in insulin. So it does dampen that a little bit. But I would say that if you are going to consume those type of beverages, then you want to probably have them with some sort of fiber as well, because then that stabilizes that blood glucose response. Yep.
Your thoughts on gluten?
I don't eat it, so I haven't eaten it knowingly in about 12 years. Or no, I'm sorry, not 12 years, 8 years now. So the problem with gluten is a couple things. One, they desiccate it with glyphosate, which means that to get a higher yield, what they'll do is they'll spray the crops before they're going to harvest them, because what that does is it increases the yield of the wheat. And of course, like when you're a farmer, it's all about the more you sell, the more money you make. So they do that here in Canada and the US, but they don't do that in Europe. So when people go to Europe, people who are sensitive to gluten here, when they go to Europe and they eat pizza like in Italy, they usually do pretty fine with it. So organic is a much better choice. If you can get flour from Italy, for example, then that would be a better potential choice for you. Yep, Hal?
Is there a difference between functional medicine and integrative medicine?
So here's the thing. Like Joe Polish taught me this, or Dan Sullivan taught me this. Whoever names the game owns the game, right? So I don't own that term. So to us, I actually don't like that term, because it doesn't really mean anything.
Which term?
Functional medicine. So integrative medicine is where you integrate multiple modalities. So you might use acupuncture, chiropractic, osteopathic, and traditional medicine. So you're integrating different modalities, and so it's an amalgamation of different techniques. Functional medicine is a philosophy. So it's a philosophy of, let's get to the root cause, let's create a personalized solution, In my practice, what we do is mostly lifestyle medicine, and 20% of it is functional medicine. Because if I don't fix the lifestyle, which is 80-20 Pareto, right? So if I don't fix the lifestyle, then all of these other labs and supplements and all these other things that I do for you aren't going to work. So we always focus on, really creating that lifestyle. And we're actually, if anyone can help me, we're trying to come up with a new term, because if somebody were to go to a functional medicine doctor and then they would come and see us, what we do would be vastly different. Our philosophies are quite different as well. Yes, Stephen, I think he was first.
So I'm writing a book on live to be 121 or live to 121. And so I'm going really deep right now on research around supplements, because that's something that I think we all probably do or have done. So Organifi Red is a supplement, right? And as you're doing some of the research, I found that a lot of supplements are not really healthy for you. There's lots of issues with health supplements, but I'm curious what your thoughts are on supplements and how we should approach that. Yeah,
so here's the thing. I look at supplements probably very different. I have a cabinet full of supplements. I get supplements shipped to me all the time, but I only take supplements that are made out of whole foods. So there's this concept we call the fingerprint of God. And so if you look at, I don't know if anyone's seen this picture, but if you look at a picture of all the dark matter in the universe, and you look at it next to the picture of the brain cells, they look identical. So there's this formula that is woven into in the entire cosmos at every single scale, which means that, if you look at a tree, it looks like your lungs, right? If you look at plant roots, it looks like the way your arteries bifurcate, right? So there's this formula that nature has used, or God has used, whatever we want to call it, and it's woven into every single thing. When you take supplements, it's like taking a branch and calling it a tree, right? It's just one element of it. So whole foods have the intelligence woven into them because they come from nature, right? So only nature can heal nature. And so our philosophy is, as much as possible, let's use whole foods. And that's why, I'm a huge fan of mushrooms, because mushrooms actually share 50% of our DNA. So genetically, they're coded with information that is resemblant to our own information. Mushrooms breathe oxygen just like our cells do, which means that they're exposed to the same viruses and bacteria and have to create resilience against those things the same way we do. That's why they're so powerful at modulating our immune system. And so whole foods is really, as much as possible, the way to go. And I know Dave Asprey, for example, he's trying to live to 100,000 years. And he takes a ton of supplements every day, right? Now, is there any peer-reviewed, double-blind, controlled studies done on that? No, but he's willing to be a guinea pig, right? We know what one thing might do in isolation, but do we know what it does, when we take all these things together? But then do we also know what it does for him, right? Because he's genetically unique as well. So all of us are genetically unique. And so what I tell people is, the longer you want to live, you just create a life that makes you want to live that long, right? And so focus on, how can I create the best life that inspires me every day? Because when you study longevity, so I spoke in Guernsey a couple of years ago now, and they had a conference. Guernsey, and has anyone heard of it? It's a small little island it's a British island in the Channel. And they are actually trying to become a blue zone. So blue zones are where a higher proportion of people live to 100. And so they're probably going to get that status, but they're rich enough and small enough of a country that if they play their cards right, they can actually be the longest living country statistically, because they have the money, and they have they have a smaller population versus Japan, for example. So one of the things that came up, every single speaker talked about this, that the greatest predictor of longevity is a sense of belonging and a sense of purpose, right? And none of these people take supplements, right? They just live a life of purpose. This is why when people have pets, when their pets die, their pets were the thing that was keeping them alive. They die shortly afterwards, right? When a spouse dies, the other spouse dies sometimes shortly afterwards, because they lost their sense of purpose. So really, to live as long as possible, live a life that's filled with purpose, and I think that's the magic, right? Where there's a sense of community, there's a sense of belonging, and there's a deep sense of purpose that you have.
I'm extending all your lives.
Can you recommend a few supplements brands that are your favorite whole food supplement brands?
Yeah, so I mean, there's a variety of them. So like the Organifi, I looked at it, that looks great. It's got reishi in it, it's got cordyceps in it. So to me, that's a big win, and it's organic, so I do like that. There's Designs for Health, which is a good brand. So they've got some whole food products that they make. Let's see. I like Organo, which is a company that I represent. They make mushroom products. So they grow reishi. Reishi is known as a mushroom of immortality. It's called a 10,000-year mushroom, and rats live 20% longer consuming it. So that's, I really feel like mushrooms are the future. So if I had to bet all my money on what's the next big thing, it's going to be mushrooms. I mean, there's so much I could say about them, but all of the challenges that we've created on this planet can be solved by mushrooms. Our pollution challenges, our plastic bottle challenge, right? Our biodiesel challenges, fuel challenges, food challenges, health challenges. They've already created the technology to solve all of these problems. So it's quite fascinating. Let me do this. Let me finish the 5 things that I was going to say, and then so you guys can finish your notes. So choose, chew, chill. Cherish, which is having gratitude, which I know you guys are really good at, and then check. So you want to observe. I'm sure many of you probably do this. You want to make sure that you at least do a visual of your poop every day. So with my son, and this is very important for your children, we feed him healthy organic food, but half of it ends up in the toilet because he doesn't chew it, right? So I'll see little bits of carrots and peas and chunks of apple and stuff in there. So to me, that's a learning point, right? It's a learning opportunity or teaching opportunity. And I show him, I'm like, dude, you didn't chew your food, right? And he can see it, right? It's a great visual for him. So check every day. Your stool should have a specific color, like it should be a darker brown. It should not have a very strong odor to it. Everyone's shit stinks, but it shouldn't have a strong odor to it. Usually if it does, it's putrefying protein. So proteins are literally rotting inside of you. And so you don't want that because that feeds certain types of bacteria which create cancer and other health challenges. Your poop should sink for the most part. And you should have about a 12-inch stool every day. That's kind of normal. And then ideally you want to go 1 to 3 times a day. So after every meal. We have a reflex, and children, you guys have young kids, so you probably know this, that every time your wife would feed the baby, shortly afterwards you'd have to change the diaper, right? And so we have a reflex called the gastrocolic reflex, which is built in because our body's like, hey, more food's coming, let's get rid of the stuff that we already processed. But as adults, we kind of suppress that, right? We can consciously control that. So if we don't like using public restrooms, for example, then we just go in the morning and then we hold it until the next day, right? But if you can go 1 to 3 times a day, ideally after every meal, then we know that system is working the way it's supposed to. And then a more advanced thing that you can do, because visually you can see if something's going on, but you're not going to see what type of bacteria there is, if there's any stealth infections or if there's any parasites or things like that. And that brings me to adrenal fatigue, because a lot of people with adrenal issues actually have a stealth infection. So this stealth infection creates chronic inflammation in their body, and the immune system and the inflammatory system is challenged by addressing this 24/7. So 24/7, 365, you're sleeping, you're awake, the immune system is combating this parasitic infection or stealth infection. And a lot of times it might even show up as anemia because just like us, they require nutrients as well. And so the bacteria in the inside of your digestive system actually get first crack at all the food that you eat. We get the leftovers, right? Because they live inside the digestive tract. Food, when we get nourished from food, it's when it crosses over into the bloodstream from the digestive tract. Does that make sense? So this is important because it's not just all these things we talked about, but at least once a year you should get your stool checked. So my whole family had ours. The spring equinox just passed, so we had our stool tested, and we'd look for stealth infections. We look for bacterial overgrowths. We look for enzyme production. And it's just a simple small sample collection, and we ship it off to a lab in North Carolina, and they analyze it for us. It's a DNA analysis, so it's very accurate. And then we can see if we have something going on. In fact, I spoke in Costa Rica, and I was out there for 10 days, and this is when I say when keeping it real goes wrong. So everyone that was making our meals for us, the food was coming from the cloud gardens, they called them, right? So it's grown above the clouds in the mountains there. So they're like, oh, let's just not wash this food and eat it. And we were eating a lot of raw salads and stuff like that. And so when we came back, as part of our annual strategy to run a stool test, we all had worms, but none of us had symptoms. So when you're resilient, it's kind of a blessing and a curse, right? Because you're not going to feel the symptoms. So because all three of us tested positive, I called some of the people that were on the trip and I said, hey, you guys might want to get tested. 3 of them couldn't work for 6 months. They were personal trainers. Like they had to take months off of work because they were just like completely jacked up.
What's the company that you get that test? Yeah.
It's called GI Map. And the test is called GI Map. The test is called GI Map. The company is called Diagnostic Solutions Laboratory.
Say that again.
Diagnostic Solutions Laboratory. We'll put it in the book, Hal. Yeah, so you need a physician who has an account to get the testing done for you. But that's the test we use in our office. We actually got some data back from them. We actually do more of these than anyone else in the world. So it's not the test that's important. Remember, it's not information that will save you. It's the experience that will save you, right? So the interpretation of that information is what's most valuable. Because if I give that test to somebody who doesn't know what they're doing, then it diminishes the value of the test, right? So a lot of times people will be like, oh, I'm just gonna get my doctor to do it. I'm like, okay, well, you're gonna be his guinea pig because you're gonna probably be his first one, right? So tell me how that works out for you. So if you're ordering the test, like if you go to your doctor and you're ordering the test, then they don't understand the importance of the test. That's why they didn't order it on you.
You had mentioned another test earlier, the BDNF, to determine your sleep. Is there a company or something that you have?
Yeah, we'll actually get into that. We have something very special for you guys. Yeah. So choose, chew, chill, cherish, check. Okay. Yes.
In regards to a lot of what you've been kind of leading into, with all the professionals that are practicing this and how it's not regulated, a lot of people have dropped their license and stuff like that, so they don't have the handcuffs on them anymore. So me and my wife have dived in with a functional doctor, and we've kind of found ourselves pulling away because where it started off.
One of the red flags I look for is how much of it is going to be supplement driven versus how much of it is going to be lifestyle driven, right? So we get people that come to us and they have a supplement graveyard, which is what we call a garbage bag full of supplements, and they come to us and like, dude, this is not functional medicine.
That's what happened to us.
Yeah.
That's why we cut it off. And
Yeah.
It's just like, this doesn't feel right.
Yeah, because you can't micromanage health, you have to macromanage it. And usually that's from lifestyle, right? So that's what we're really big on. Like our whole premise is, I'm gonna do whatever it takes to keep you out of my office, right? Because the number of people that are sick, that number is so big that I'm delusional if I think I'm gonna fix everybody. So I wanna keep as many people out of my office as possible, so I'm gonna give you like the simplest, easiest, most profound things that you can do, and 80% of those people don't end up needing us, and I'm totally okay with that, right? So I think that, that's probably the red flag is are we just gonna fix this with supplements, or how much emphasis is there on lifestyle? And the lifestyle is where it's at. That's where, because here's the thing, if I change your lifestyle, I don't just change your lifestyle, I change your kid's lifestyle. And I changed his lifestyle and your grandkid's lifestyle. I just changed your entire lineage, right? And lifestyle is something that doesn't cost us any. It costs us time, but it doesn't cost us money. Whereas a supplement is and supplements are great when you need them, but there's a transient benefit. So the moment the bottle runs out, the benefit might be gone, right? We recommend supplements like herbs, for example, If somebody has a parasite and we want to knock it out, then we're going to recommend something to them to get rid of it. But we're also going to get their own immune system working better by making sure they're getting enough sleep, that they're not, trashing their adrenals, that they're, getting enough sunlight and connecting with nature. Like, you still have to do those things, right? I think those are minimum requirements that we all have to have, regardless of what our goals are. It's like a plant, right? So if a plant's wilting, I'm going to ask, am I giving it enough water? Am I giving it enough sunlight? Am I giving it enough nutrition through the soil, right? I'm not just going to start like cutting body parts off of it, right? Or, we always have to start with the basics.
Thank you.
Yep. I don't know. I'll let you feel it.
Well, let's do this. This is going well, huh?
Yes.
This is going really well. What I think we should do is a couple of things. One, why don't we see what questions are out there, and then maybe what you can do is we can see where the energy is and the theme is. I've seen Johnny V do this, and it works really well. Most things I do that work well, I stole from Johnny V. So what I want to do is I want to just see where the energy is with your questions, and then if there is a theme emerging, we should move towards that accomplishes the goals for most of the guys in the room. So I'm going to go left to right here. JB?
Yeah, love your take on intermittent fasting, what Brad asked about. Also, your take on caffeine, plant-based versus eating meat, as well as coffee enemas.
Okay.
Awesome. That's a good
That's
list.
tomorrow.
Storm?
I'd like to know your thoughts on alkalinic water, and also when the optimal time for digestion is when you do eat, if you drink before, during, or after, and how long, if it's before, how long after.
Okay, great question. Yep.
All right, cool.
Couple things. So with coffee enemas, also colon hydrotherapy as a process, and then food allergies developed from leaky gut and handling those, as well as colitis, and you had talked about other things like that.
Sure.
You mentioned sleep tips, but I didn't know if you covered those sleep tips.
I think I got thrown off, so we'll cover we'll cover some of that. Yep.
Foods you won't touch, cryotherapy, and then of course we need to hit on the adrenal fatigue.
Okay. Yep.
We have 4 kids, so contraception would be great.
Yeah.
Just put your cell phone in your pocket.
No joke. Joe?
I'm wondering if there's just kind of core daily things, like you mentioned, like time in the sun. Like, are there other things that are just, these are the pillars of what a healthy day should look like?
Sure.
And on that note, throughout the year, what doctors do you recommend seeing, and what supplements or tests you recommend as well? Just in general, like, hey, make sure you're seeing this type of doctor and getting these tests. It's kind of like maybe a bare minimum.
Sure.
I'd say we've covered a lot, and I find myself going, where do I start? So if we could only do one thing walking out of here,
Okay.
How did I know?
I'll just throw a second towards John's intermittent fasting and then low carb thoughts as well.
Okay.
Two things. One is with kids and probiotics and antibiotics and all that kind of stuff. My wife and I kind of go back and forth, so we're looking for like telemedicine or something to be able to, because she doesn't. We struggle with that. And then I'm dealing with like that tennis elbow kind of thing and trying a bunch of BBC shots and a bunch of other stuff trying to get it to go away. And I've never had issues like this, so I'm curious.
Okay.
Can you be our doctor?
So,
Lonnie, if you could keep this answer to 3 hours or less,
yeah.
that would be great.
All right, so what do we got? So sleep, let me hit that one because I know we talked about that. So a good night's sleep actually starts in the morning.
Hold on. I have to read this note. Oh. So you're gonna love this. It's just great. This is a great energy to add to this. Kane hands me a note that says, "Make him a lifetime member now." That's awesome. That's great. Yeah, do you know where you want to go with this? Should we go fasting? Because I heard that a couple times. I know we wanted to get back there.
Yeah, sure. So here's the thing with fasting. So there's three things that we recommend. Everyone do focus on. Sleep is one, because that's one of the most parasympathetic things that you can do. We'll get into that in a second. Fasting is another. So the question people should be asking is not what should I be eating. The question they should be asking is how long should I not be eating for? And so that number is going to vary from person to person depending on their state of health. But you can start with a 16-hour fast, right? The classic 16-8, where you're eating dinner, let's say at 6 o'clock in the evening, and then you're not eating until noon the next day, right? Or whatever that 16 hours works out to for you. So that would be one way, and that just gives the digestive system a break, right? It gives the liver a break, it gives the kidneys a break, because remember, everything you eat has to be processed, it has to be metabolized. To liquefy your food takes a lot of energy, right? So when we're eating, 40% of our energy goes towards digestion, and also creates an immune response as well. So we're taxing these systems in our body. So if you ever want a solution, just look at what kids do. When kids don't feel well, what do? They sleep and they don't eat. Right? Because again, they're not trying to, they don't say, give me Advil, I want to go back and play. Right? They listen to their bodies. And so what does their body tell them to do? It tells them, and the third one is silence. So they get quiet, they don't eat, and they go to sleep. And how fast do they recover? Almost immediately. Right? What do adults do? The exact opposite. They complain about how they feel, right? They comfort themselves with food, right, which is usually not the right food choices, and they stay up, right? They don't go to sleep or they go to work. So just do what children do. They already know. They're our teachers. Like, as much as we want to teach our kids, like, they teach us a lot too. So fasting for 3 days, there's actually a 3-day fast that we recommend, and it's super easy. Anyone can do it. And it's basically a mixture of green tea, maple syrup, and lemon. So the reason you have the maple syrup is because pound for pound, grade B maple syrup has the highest amount of sweetness for the lowest amount of carbs. And what that does is it keeps your blood sugar level stable. And so you would sip on that drink, and I can share the recipe with you. So you would make this mixture, and then you would sip on it every 10 minutes. So your blood sugar stays stable. So blood sugar is only a problem when it's doing this. Because every time your blood sugar goes up and down, there's this catecholamine and stress response that's taking place, right? But if it stays like this, you're golden. You're going to have sharper thinking. You're going to have amazing mental clarity. Your energy is going to be amazing. You're not going to be hungry. So after 3 days of doing this, people are like, can I just do this for the rest of my life? Because they feel so much better. And because there's no protein in that meal or in that drink, there's no immune reaction. So your immune system can only react to proteins. So just something to be mindful of is the immune system only reacts to proteins. So we cut out the proteins for 3 days. We keep the blood sugar levels rock solid. People feel amazing. Okay, so that's a more extended fast. And then you can get more advanced. You can do like a mono fruit fast where you might just drink grape juice for several days, or you can just eat mangoes, like just a single source of nutrition. And then you can also do a water fast. So that's just water, and then the hardest type of fast is a dry fast, where you don't eat or drink anything. And that gives your system the most deepest cleansing possible. Yeah.
How often would you recommend that 3-day fast?
Depending on the goal for the client, but if you can do that once a month, I mean, you're going to feel pretty good.
And what about the drink for if you're intermittent fasting for 16 hours? Is your recommendation just water?
You could do water, you could do coffee.
Okay.
Like, it's not going to break your fast. You could do tea. So, a bulletproof is great. I think that I would argue that mushroom coffee is far superior because it has the mushrooms in it. But you can make the mushroom coffee bulletproof style. Right? So
butter in it's a good thing.
It depends. Right? So you can actually, like, one of the things that we genetically test for is, how tolerant you are to saturated fats. So some people are going to, like, it would be ill-advised for me to say that one thing is good for everybody in this room, right? That kind of defeats the first thing that I said, which is everyone's individualized. So each of you will have unique requirements, but there's certain things that are panaceas, which means they apply to everybody. So fasting, that would apply to everybody. Getting sunlight would apply to everybody. Getting grounded would apply to everybody. So, certain things will apply to everyone, but certain things, you just want to be a little bit more specific based on what's right for you.
Is the third thing silence? You
Yeah, so the third thing is silence, and that's meditation, right? And so interestingly enough, they've done studies and they found when you go into complete silence or deprivation, you actually have more nerve growth taking place. So that's why I like float tanks. If you can get into them periodically, then that's a great way to, especially for us dads, right? Like our business are tugging at us, our kids are tugging at us, our wives are tugging at us. And so getting in there, phones are, distracting us. So if you can get into a float tank, a couple times a month if possible, then that's a huge upside for you.
I have to tell you this real quick. I did the float tank. Did I tell you the story, Sam? I did this float tank and I was so excited about it. It's like 1,500 pounds of salt, right?
Yeah.
In this water or something. It's crazy. And the guy's giving me the instructions and he's like, yeah, and if you happen to don't touch the water and touch your eye.
Yeah.
Because it's like, you're gonna not be happy about that. And he says, but if you do, grab this bottle over here and just spray it in your eye. It's fresh water, it'll just clear it out. So I'm in the water and I somehow turn and splash and it gets in the night. I'm like, oh, and I grab the bottle and I start spraying. I open my eyes and I start spraying it. And dude, somebody filled the bottle with all this salt water, and I'm like, ah! And it's dark in there, and you're in this cave, and I'm pushing it up, and trying to get out, and I'm trying to find my way to the shower. Dude, it was the craziest experience. This is totally nuts. Yeah, you should try that. It's relaxing.
I don't know if we finished the sleep thing.
We didn't.
We didn't, right?
And
yeah.
I wanted to ask, did you cover the stem cell thing? I might have been spacing and.
Oh yeah, so yeah, you will get stem cell regeneration. I mean, you're always producing stem cells, right? The thing is that when you give a system a break, right, it's going to repair and regenerate itself because it's not working, right? Just like anything, right? If I give you a break, like if I mentally give you a break, you're going to regenerate and you're going to come back stronger. So when you come off of a fast, you want to keep your meals liquid if possible, and you want to keep your meals light for the first few days, and then you can transition back into a normal diet. There's actually, speaking of longevity, there's you might want to write this down, something called the Prolon fasting mimicking diet. And they've spent $40 million researching this, and it just came out a couple of years ago at UC Berkeley. And what they found is they were able to replicate a diet that mimics fasting. So you get all the benefits of fasting for 5 days, because the true benefits of fasting, the stem cell production, actually occurs on days 4 and 5. So what they did was they figured out how much calories we can restrict for 5 days, and to get you into that 5-day window where you can start regenerating stem cells.
Prolonged fasting, what?
Fasting mimicking diet. ProlonFMD.com is the website, I believe. I think I can get you guys a code too if you want to try that. But it's pre-packaged food. It's like dehydrated food and soups and stuff like that. But it tastes delicious, which is kind of good and bad, because when you're fasting, and the food tastes good, you want more of it. But it was very easy. So that would be good for all of you guys in here.
The fasting, is there an age at which it makes sense to get your kids involved in fasting if it's a 16-8?
I don't know the answer to that, to be totally transparent, right? I would hate to misguide you on that. Let me look into that. I'll find out. I know the guy that created the fasting program, Walter Longo, so I can reach out to his team and ask them if there's, they usually don't recommend that protocol for kids under 18, but that might be more for liability issues. So let me get the actual answer and get back to you guys on that. Yeah.
My kids fast unless I feed them pizza.
There you go, the pizza fast. You could probably patent that.
What was the company you said, the meals?
It's Prolon, PROLON, and then I believe the website is prolonfmd.com.
You said sleep starts in the morning?
Yeah, so a good night's sleep starts actually in the morning. And
Sachin, hold that thought for 1 second. Hey guys, I just want to be conscious and aware of everybody's energy and how you're feeling, and just anytime we're sitting for an extended period of time, I want to check in. This is going so well, and there's so much here that I'm wondering if maybe what we do is we cover sleep and we stop on that, and then why don't we give Sachin a break? We'll all go get some food, get in the sun, get our stretch. And then would you be game, I'm putting you on the spot, how are you gonna say no to this? Would you be game, for coming back and doing like a part 2 where we could do
Oh, of course, yeah.
30 or, would you guys be down with that?
Yeah.
So that way we can break it up a little bit, and then you can also maybe process some of your questions. Sachin can have the list and he can process some of this about how he wants to best deliver it to you. And does that sound good?
Yeah.
All right, so let's get into this.
Like no more room for no.
So all 40 of us will not assault Sachin during.
Yeah, that's right.
Whoever's going to lunch with him.
That's awesome. Cool. So we'll cover sleep, and then we'll take a break for lunch. And before anybody runs out, let me give you instructions on how we're going to take our break and when we're going to be back. All right.
Okay, so a good night's sleep actually starts in the morning. And so the best thing you can do in the morning is get outside, because we have a clock which we've artificially as humans created, but then the earth has a clock as well, which is the sun. So the positioning of the sun actually tells our body what time of day it is, because animals in nature, they don't wear watches, right? They don't pay attention to time, they pay attention to the positioning of the sun. So getting sunlight in the morning will actually increase dopamine, and dopamine is what drives us and motivates us and takes us to task completion. So getting more dopamine by getting sunlight exposure is going to be very powerful for you. Now, in the winter, I know that's hard because, you know, if I'm up at 5 in the morning, it's like pitch black outside. So if you can, you know, it's hard to do that in the winter. It's hard to get, obviously, sunlight, but just make it a point when the sun comes up to go outside. There's nothing as powerful as sunlight. So as I mentioned, when the sun is out, you're getting 30,000 lux versus being indoors where you're getting 500 lux. If you study people who were highly successful like Steve Jobs, when he had to solve a problem, what would he do? He'd go for a walk, right? He probably didn't know why that worked for him, but when you increase sunlight exposure, you decrease blood pressure. And what that also does is it increases vasodilation, so you get more blood flowing to you get better microcirculation in the body.
I've heard not to wear sunglasses when you do that because that will restrict the sun entering your eyes.
Yeah, so it's funny, my brother is an optometrist, so him and I go back and forth on this all the time. And so he's always like, dude, why aren't you wearing your sunglasses? And I'm like, dude, why aren't you reading the research? Because you have to... So yeah, you want to, and it's what's really interesting is you're more likely to get sunburned if you wear sunglasses. What? Yeah, because your brain can't process how much light there is, so it can't create a response. So yeah.
I just had this vision of everybody out the pool talking, and they're all like, "What's that?"
What's interesting about sunlight, or what you just mentioned, John, is that people who are very sensitive to light actually are sympathetic dominant, because when we're under stress, we dilate our pupils. So you'll see some people that are stressed, like who are stress balls, that they go out even on a cloudy day and it's like blinding to them. And then there's people that wear sunglasses in clubs too, right? So imagine how much stress they're under. So get morning sunlight, and then midday sun is actually really important as well. So midday sun, and that hits on the question about when's the best time to actually eat. Our digestion is strongest midday. So in many cultures, like in Ayurvedic medicine and in India, they actually eat their biggest meal at lunch, because that's when our digestive fire is actually strongest. And then dinner is a much smaller meal. Not so much anymore because of times are changing, but that's traditionally how they would eat. So midday sun is important because it increases serotonin. And so serotonin is our feel-good neurotransmitter. So when you're in the sun, you automatically start feeling better, right? And so we start feeling better because of that. But later on in the evening, serotonin turns into melatonin. So you can't make adequate amounts of melatonin if you didn't make serotonin during the day. Okay, so that's why sunlight exposure is super important. And the vitamin that helps facilitate that is vitamin B6. And vitamin B6 is depleted in people who are chronically stressed out. So if you're chronically stressed out and you're not getting enough sunlight, good luck making melatonin in the evening. Okay, so you want to get midday sun, and then if you can watch the sunset, it's one of the most relaxing things. It only takes about 5 minutes, but if you can watch the sunset, then that signals to your body, okay, it's time for us to start winding down. And so in the evening, what should happen is cortisol is highest in the morning, and then it drops off as the day goes on, and as cortisol drops, melatonin increases. So there's an inverse relationship between these two. So you can't have high cortisol and high melatonin. It's impossible to have both of those simultaneously. They're inversely related. And so if your stress is high in the evening, so if you have unresolved stress, in the relationship or with the kids, or you're watching TV and you're watching things that are stressful, for example, like I was trying to listen to David Goggins' book yesterday, and I was like, man, what a mistake that was. Like right before bed, I was like, man, this guy had it bad, right? And it made me feel good that my life wasn't that bad, but just listening to stuff like that, I had to turn it off after a while, is going to raise our cortisol levels, right? I just wanted to kill his dad, didn't you?
Yes.
Right? So, I'm sure my cortisol was through the roof at that point. So you want to make sure that you're getting adequate sunlight exposure. The other thing you want to do is you want to change the light bulbs in your home. So during the day, when the sun is above us, right, our brain is processing shadows as well. So when I look at somebody in the sun and it's 12 o'clock in the day, the sun is casting shadows differently than if it's in the morning or if it's in the evening. So if all of our lighting is coming from above us, the brain thinks it's daytime, especially if it's full spectrum lighting, which a lot of people have in their homes. So you can get 2700 Kelvin bulbs, which are more on the yellow side, and instead of having those overhead, you can have them in lamps, because lamps are more eye level, right? So think of the sunset is going to be more eye level versus daytime it's going to be more above. Okay. Another little sleep hack is to get a timer for your router on your Wi-Fi device, so you don't have to unplug it and plug it in every day. You can just let the router turn on and off automatically. So just go to Home Depot and get something to cut that at night. And of course, you guys know this, screen exposure is something you want to avoid. You can actually get apps on your phone that help you control the spectrum of light on your screen. So there's Twilight for Android, and then Apple has Night Shift that you can use. So if you must use your phone, then you can use those screen hacks. But then you can also get glasses. So the best ones that I've found are called Raw Aura. So R-A, and then I think it's R-A-O-R-A. So that's the brand. It's called Raw Aura. They make the best blue blocking glasses. Okay, so that's another way to get better sleep. And then I sleep with a grounding.
You're saying that when you're using a computer, you should wear those?
When you're using computer, yes. If you're watching TV, yes. And they have daytime glasses and they have nighttime glasses. So the nighttime glasses are going to be more intense in terms of their redness. On your computer, you can get an application called Flux. I think it's justgetflux.com, and that automatically changes the spectrum on the screen. And you can actually go in darkroom mode where your whole screen turns red. So if you're just typing up emails or something, then you're not getting overly stimulated by it. But keep in mind that sometimes your emails will raise your cortisol too. So you want to be mindful of that. And then I use a grounding throw. Okay, so if it's hard, where I live in Canada, so it's hard to get barefoot on the earth all the time, but we're electrical beings, and so it's important for us to, release, some of that or regain our proper electrical charge. So you can if you go to earthing.com, you can buy a grounding throw, and I just lay that over my bed sheet, and it plugs into the ground outlet on my in my room. So now you stay grounded.
What's the website?
It's called earthing.com.
What is it doing?
It's electrically grounding you. So we're the only animals that wear shoes. And so all other animals in nature are directly connected electrically exchanging electrons with the earth. So getting barefoot out there is super important. There's a whole documentary on it called Earthing, and they would bury people in dirt and their chronic issues would go away. Yeah, it's pretty wild. So it's an earthing throw. So I like things that are passive. I like things that make me feel better right away. And I like things that I can track. And I like things that I don't have to think about. So I don't have to think about that throw. I just plug it in once and then it's done. Yep. Yeah, and I've got
all sorts of stuff to ground.
Yeah, so if you go to earthing.com, you'll see all the different tools that they have. There's like bracelets that you can get that plug into the grounding outlet. So you got to be careful to remember that you're plugged into the wall. And then you can actually get a mat that goes across your desk so that when you're typing on your computer, you're staying grounded as well. Yeah. So this is like very powerful stuff. It's almost so simple that people don't do it. That's what's frustrating to me, is that sometimes people, because it's so simple, they don't do it. But you tell them to do, take an expensive bottle of pills and they'll do that, right? So that's what I'm trying to change. I'm just trying to get you guys to unlock this inner potential that you have. And if you can get out and ground, then go ahead and do that, right? Just, I remember when we were growing up, my mom would say, don't go on the grass barefoot, because she didn't want us to track dirt into the house, right? But she grew up in India and everyone's barefoot. Like, I'll tell you a funny story, then maybe we could wrap it up for now. But we went to India for 3 weeks. Do you have a quick question? And so all the poor people, well, not all, but many of the poor people are grounding because they don't have shoes. They can't afford shoes. So they're grounding all the time. They don't have electricity because they live in little huts. So they're using fire, right? And interestingly enough, artificial light will reduce your melatonin production by about 40%. Melatonin is not just a sleep hormone, it's actually your most important immune modulating hormone. That's why when kids are sick, they sleep, right? That's why we should be sleeping more. And so campfire and moonlight only reduces it by 2 to 5%. Okay, so like a fireplace in your home can actually be a much better source of light, or candlelight can be a much better source of light that doesn't disrupt that circadian rhythm. So they're, in living in these huts, they have like nothing, but they have everything, because they're grounding, they're using fires to keep themselves warm. They have, very close relationships, because, you can't live in a tent and hate your spouse, right? Like, you've got to resolve issues pretty quickly, right? You can't go to the East Wing and be on your own. So they're doing all these things that I'm telling you. They're getting sunlight, right? They're not wearing sunglasses, like they can't afford them. So all these things that we are telling our patients to do, the poorest of the poor people are already doing. And these people, they're like super resilient. Right? Like, they're not sick. They don't have the same problems that, wealthy people do, or, well-to-do people do, or even the average person does. And they're unconsciously competent, right? They don't even know that they're doing it. But then you get people who, especially in India, you get people and you tell them to do that, and they're not going to do it because poor people do it, right? So it's just an interesting paradox. But yeah, so everything, it's just the most basic things. So this is the billion-dollar apparatus that we all have. And I kind of jokingly say this, but we're all trillionaires, right? We have trillions of cells that are self-regulating, and it's when we realize that we can unlock that inner potential that we all have.
Give it up for Sachin, everybody.